The village of Havenmere was the kind of place that didn't exist on tourist maps. Hidden between sleepy pine woods and fog-wrapped hills, it offered silence like a gift, and you took it with both hands. After years of city living, where car horns replaced birdsong and sleep was a myth, the tiny cottage on the edge of Havenmere felt like a dream. A little crooked, a little too cold at night, but undeniably yours. The landlord had mentioned only one neighbor. Quiet man. Keeps to himself. Nothing to worry about. You didn't think much of it, until you met Heeseung. Well, met might have been generous. He didn't appear when you moved in, not even when the movers accidentally shattered a box of dishes on the porch. Not when you spent 20 minutes cursing at a bookshelf stuck in the hallway. But as night fell, candles flickered in your windows, and you began softly humming a tune you used to sing during late-night cleaning sprees. Someone knocked. No, tapped. Light, sharp, deliberate. You startled, looking toward the living room window. A figure stood just outside the glass, tall, wrapped in a black coat, with dark hair tousled by the wind and a face too calm to be kind. You cracked the window cautiously. Hello. Heeseung didn't smile. His eyes were a strange shade of gray, cool, unreadable, and his voice matched them, smooth but distant. Do you always sing at night? You blinked. I mean, yeah. Sometimes. Is that a problem? I value silence. And pitch. You stared, waiting for some hint of humor. There was none. Wow, you said, blinking. Okay. Thanks for the warm welcome, neighbor. Heeseung didn't respond. He turned, muttered something about noise pollution, and walked away before you could add another word. You closed the window a little harder than necessary. Grump. The next morning, you caught your first full glimpse of Heeseung in daylight, or what passed for daylight in mist-covered Havenmere. He slipped out of his house with a hood drawn over his head, sunglasses covering most of his face despite the overcast sky. He moved quickly, precisely, like someone trained to avoid notice. He went straight to the mailbox, took only one envelope, and disappeared back into his house like a ghost. No glance in your direction. No greeting. You waved anyway. He didn't wave back. The silent war started slowly. You sang while watering your plants on the windowsill. Heeseung peeked through his curtains with an expression of pure disapproval. You baked muffins, blueberry, the good kind, and left them on his doorstep. They returned untouched in a plastic container labeled "Please don't do this again." You hummed during your evening walks around the garden. Heeseung knocked on the shared wall between your houses, once, twice, in rhythm with your song. You rolled your eyes every time, but secretly, you didn't mind. There was something almost theatrical about him, like a forgotten character from an old novel, refusing to be part of the plot. But late one night, as you sat near your open window and sang a familiar melody to yourself, you paused. A soft hum floated back. Not loud, not confident, but in tune, and unmistakably coming from Heeseung's side of the wall. You didn't mention it the next day. Neither did he. But when you sang again that night, the humming returned, barely there, like a ghost singing harmony with you through the darkness. And for the first time, you wondered if Heeseung was really as heartless as he tried so hard to seem. The village moved at its own pace, mornings filled with fog and fresh bread, afternoons quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. You were starting to fall in love with the stillness. Except for Heeseung. He was the only part of Havenmere that felt like static in a lullaby, sharp, awkward, and constantly keeping distance. But despite yourself, you were curious. You started noticing things. Little oddities that didn't quite add up. Heeseung never stepped outside during daylight unless it was clouded over completely. Even then, he wore gloves, sunglasses, and that same heavy coat. You never saw him at the grocer or the bookstore. He had no delivery records at the post office, but somehow always had the exact herbs and ingredients needed for his elaborate meals, the scent of them occasionally wafting through his slightly ajar kitchen window. He never had visitors. Never made phone calls. Never left lights on at night, but sometimes, just sometimes, you could swear you saw a faint red glow through the curtains. You weren't exactly suspicious. Just fascinated. He was too quiet, too graceful in his movements. Once, you caught him in the forest behind your cottages, just standing there, completely still, like a statue among trees. You called out. He turned and disappeared before you could blink. It was eerie, but oddly poetic. One late afternoon, a storm rolled in. The clouds moved fast, swallowing up the last bits of golden light. You were gathering fallen branches when you slipped on a wet patch of moss and yelped, twisting your ankle. Pain shot up your leg, and you collapsed onto the cold earth with a frustrated hiss. Then, footsteps. You looked up. Heeseung was standing a few feet away, an umbrella in one hand, expression unreadable. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," you said quickly, trying to sit up and regretting it immediately. Heeseung sighed, walked over, and knelt beside you. You blinked. "You came outside for this?" "You were loud," he muttered. "Wow. Thank you for your concern, vampire neighbor." He didn't laugh. Not even a twitch of a smile. Instead, Heeseung reached for your arm. "Don't move." Before you could protest, he lifted you effortlessly, one arm under your knees, the other at your back. His touch was colder than expected, not icy, but not quite human warm either. Your heart thudded. "You don't have to." "I'm not letting you limp back and drag mud into the shared hallway," Heeseung replied smoothly. You stared at him as he carried you the rest of the way. His jaw was tight, but his grip was gentle. The moment felt suspended, like if you spoke too loudly, it would shatter. Once inside, he placed you on your couch and turned to leave, but you grabbed his sleeve lightly. "Wait." Heeseung paused, eyes flicking down to your hand. "Thank you," you said softly. For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or something older. Something aching. "You're welcome," Heeseung murmured. And then, like always, he slipped away. That night, you dreamt of letters burning, voices you couldn't place, and a forest soaked in silver moonlight. And when you woke up, one thought echoed in your mind. Heeseung feels familiar. But you didn't know why. The pain in your ankle faded over the next few days, but Heeseung's presence lingered like fog, quiet and impossible to ignore. You hadn't seen him since he carried you home, but you noticed subtle signs of his watchfulness. A note in your mailbox, written in tidy block letters, "Don't walk the forest trail after sundown." No signature, of course, but who else could it be? You ignored the warning. Not because you didn't believe him, but because you didn't like being told what to do by a man who still hadn't smiled once since you moved in. So, that evening, when a craving for chestnut bread sent you to the other side of the village, you took the shortcut through the woods, just as the sun dipped under the hills. And at first it was fine. Mist curled around your boots. The trees whispered softly, swaying above like protectors. Then something shifted. The woods went too quiet. The air thickened, heavy and damp. The wind stopped. Even the birds fell silent. You paused, heart thudding. "Hello," you called out, unsure why you even bothered. And then you saw it. A figure standing ahead on the path, backlit by the last scraps of sunlight. Tall. Too tall. Not moving. Its head turned in a slow, unnatural tilt. You froze. The next few seconds happened in a blur. The thing rushed toward you, soundless and inhumanly fast. You turned to run, but your foot caught a root, and you hit the ground hard. Panic clouded your vision. Just as the shadow loomed over you, a blur of motion, a sharp crack, then silence. When you opened your eyes, Heeseung was standing between you and the creature. No coat, no sunglasses, just a black shirt clinging to his frame, sleeves torn, veins darkened beneath his skin like ink bleeding through marble. His back was tense, breath shallow, but his voice, when he spoke, was ice-cold. "You picked the wrong night." You watched, stunned, as Heeseung lunged at the creature. It screeched, a sound that wasn't meant for human ears, and vanished into mist, as if torn apart midair. The forest stilled. Heeseung stood motionless for a moment, then slowly turned to you. You sat up shakily. What was that?" "I told you not to come here after dark." "Yeah, you left a post-it note. You didn't say monsters were involved." Heeseung walked toward you. You noticed now, his eyes. No longer gray. They glowed faintly red in the moonlight, like dying embers. You swallowed hard. "You're not just weird, are you?" His voice was quiet. "No." "Are you going to kill me too?" "No," he said, almost offended. You stood up, wincing slightly. "Okay, then. What are you?" Heeseung hesitated, then said the words like pulling teeth. "I was a vampire." The silence that followed was too big to fill. I gave it up," he said simply. "A long time ago." You stared. "You can do that. Most don't. Most wouldn't. Why did you?" He didn't answer. Instead, Heeseung stepped past you, back into the trees. "Come. It's not safe here anymore." You followed him without question. That night, back in your cottage, you stared at the ceiling for hours. Every heartbeat echoed with questions. Heeseung had saved you, fought like something not entirely human, and then vanished back into solitude like a ghost too tired to haunt. He wasn't just your grumpy neighbor anymore. He was something more. And you wanted to know why. You didn't sleep that night. How could you, knowing your neighbor, Heeseung, the man who complained about your singing and wore sunglasses in the fog, had once been something that fed on blood and shadows. But what kept you awake wasn't fear. It was the way he'd looked at you. Not like a vampire. Not even like a neighbor. Like someone trying to remember a dream he thought he'd forgotten. The next morning, you knocked on Heeseung's door. He didn't answer. Of course. You tried again the next day. And the next. On the fourth day, the door creaked open. He was there, silent, guarded. You saw he hadn't shaved. He looked tired. You didn't ask if you could come in. You just said, "We need to talk." Heeseung exhaled slowly and stepped aside. Inside, his home was warm but dim. No lights. Curtains drawn tight. The scent of old paper and pine wood filled the air. You wandered past the threshold, half in awe, half in disbelief. You really live like a vampire. I said I was one. I'm retired, Heeseung muttered. You turned to him. So, who was it? What? The person you gave it all up for. The one you loved. Heeseung stilled. You expected a lie. Or silence. But instead, he walked to a drawer, pulled out a small wooden box, and opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens. All written in different inks, on mismatched paper, folded neatly. Some weathered at the corners, others still crisp. You picked one up. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. You read aloud. I think the woods miss you. I do too. Even if I don't know your face, I feel like I know your sadness. Your breath hitched. I wrote these. Heeseung looked at you with something close to sorrow. You used to leave them in the hollow tree. You said you didn't believe anyone would answer, but you kept writing anyway. A memory stirred. Flashes. A younger version of you. Rain. A tree with a carved heart on its trunk. Hands slipping letters between bark and moss. I don't remember this, you whispered. You wouldn't, Heeseung said quietly. You disappeared one night. The village said you moved away. But I knew something was wrong. You clutched the letter like it could anchor you. So you didn't give up your powers for your sister? Heeseung shook his head, gaze heavy. I gave them up for you. You looked up sharply. He stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know your face. Only your words. But those letters, they made me feel human again. They made me want to be. Your eyes stung. I thought if I gave up everything, my strength, my immortality, I could live in the same world as you. Find you. Maybe meet you, properly. You swallowed the ache in your throat. And then I moved in next door. Heeseung let out a quiet, humorless laugh. And you sang through the walls and drove me insane. You laughed, too, wet, shaky. But why didn't you say anything sooner? I didn't know it was you. Not until I saw your handwriting in your notebook last week. The way you draw hearts in the margins. The little smiley faces. It was the same. You sat down, heart pounding. I don't remember writing them, you said again, softer this time. I feel like I'm waking up from a dream. I've been dreaming of you for years, Heeseung replied. You looked up at him. And for the first time since you'd met him, he was smiling. Just a little. But it changed everything. The fog came early that morning, dense and unnatural. You stood at your window, watching the mist curl between the trees, swallowing the path that led to the forest. It looked like something was hiding inside it, watching, waiting. You clutched the letter in your hand. The same one you had read aloud the night before. Heeseung had left it with you. No words, no warnings. Just quietly placed it in your hand before walking back to his cottage like he hadn't just admitted that you were the reason he gave up eternity. You hadn't slept again. Not because of fear, but because your chest felt too full of things you couldn't name. The letters. The forest. Heeseung's red eyes in the moonlight. And your own forgotten past, slipping through your fingers like water. Later that afternoon, you sat outside with a thermos of tea and your sketchbook. The air was cold, but bearable. Every so often, you glanced at Heeseung's cottage across the path. His curtains twitched. You smiled, just a little. Creepy and cute, you whispered to yourself. Then, a rustling sound. You looked up. And there, standing a few feet away, was a man in a long gray coat, face too smooth, eyes too sharp. Lovely weather, he said casually. You froze. He looked wrong. Not like the villagers. Not even like Heeseung. There was something off in the way he moved, like he didn't quite fit inside his skin. Before you could respond, a voice cut through the silence like a blade. She's not yours. You turned, and Heeseung was suddenly there, standing between you and the stranger, posture taut. Ah, the man said, smiling. Lee Heeseung. Still playing house. Leave, Heeseung growled, something ancient in his tone. The man ignored him and looked at you. Do you know what he was, sweetheart? Do you know how many he drank dry before he found your letters? Shut up, Heeseung snarled. I could tell her, the man continued, voice lilting. I could show her your past. Everything you buried. Your hands trembled. But you stepped closer to Heeseung, not away. He didn't move. Just stood like a wall, shielding you. She doesn't need your poison, Heeseung said darkly. You think you're human now, the man sneered. You think love makes you new? I don't care what I was, Heeseung said, voice low. I care what I chose. And I chose her. The man's smile faded. For a moment, the fog thickened, and then the stranger vanished, like smoke curling into the trees. After a long silence, you touched Heeseung's sleeve. You okay? You asked quietly. He turned to you, and you could see it now, how much effort it took him to stay calm. His fangs had slightly descended, his pupils still thin and sharp. I'm sorry you saw that, Heeseung murmured. What was he? Someone I used to know. From before. And he's going to come back. Yes. You hesitated. Because of me. Because I gave up everything for you. You looked up at him, eyes stinging. I'm not the girl from those letters anymore, Heeseung. He looked down at you, quiet for a heartbeat. You're more. That night, you left your porch light on. And hours later, just before sunrise, you heard a soft knock at your door. When you opened it, Heeseung was standing there. In the doorway. Not asking to come in. Just looking at you like you were the only thing holding him to the earth. You stepped aside. Come in, you said softly. And this time, he did. Before the cottage. Before the quiet village and the borrowed name, Lee Heeseung. There was only hunger. Heeseung had walked the earth with no heartbeat and no reason. Immortality was a cage, and he had long stopped pretending it wasn't. Centuries bled together, dark alleys, whispers of his name, blood on his hands. They called him a ghost, a curse, a shadow with eyes that burned red. And then, a letter. Tucked into a hollow tree in a forgotten forest, scribbled in a rush. The ink was smudged, the corners damp from rain. But the words. They were curious. Honest. Human. Dear whoever finds this, do you ever feel like no one sees you, even when you're standing in the middle of a room? I don't know why I'm writing this, except maybe I hope someone's listening. Heeseung didn't know why he kept it. Didn't know why, days later, he returned to the tree and found another. And another. Weeks passed. He didn't answer. But he read. Every note. You told the tree things you told no one else. About your parents fighting. Your fear of being ordinary. Your dreams of leaving. How sometimes you talked to the woods because they didn't talk back. And Heeseung found himself drawn to you. Not your blood. Not your body. Your voice. Your sadness matched his own, and yet, you still dreamed. You still hoped. And somehow, that made him hate the monster he was. He started to change. Drank less. Wandered more. Stayed near the village, near the tree. And then one night, he found you. Not your face. Your footprint. A single boot print in the frost, near the hollow. Fresh. You had just been there. Heeseung didn't follow. He didn't dare. Because if he saw your face, if he heard your voice with his own ears, he knew it would break him. He would want everything. He would want you. And monsters don't get to want. So instead, he began to write back. Just once. To the girl who talks to trees. I see you. Even if you can't see me. He never signed it. But the next letter you left was different. Giddy. Hopeful. You'd written, I got a reply. You don't know how much this means. And that was the night it happened. That was the night Heeseung, a vampire older than war, colder than death, realized he had fallen in love. Not with a face. Not with a body. With a soul. With you. Back in the present, Heeseung sat on your couch, fingers tracing the edge of one of your old letters. You were curled up on the other end, staring at the fire. You never came to find me? I couldn't, he said softly. I was afraid I'd ruin it. Afraid you'd run. And when I disappeared, I searched, Heeseung admitted. Everywhere. But it was like the world had swallowed you. You were quiet for a moment, then asked, Do you ever wish you hadn't given up your powers? No. He looked at you, really looked. I'd give them up 1,000 times just to sit here beside you like this. Your heart cracked open. Heeseung didn't touch you. But the air between you was electric, warmth and ache and things still unsaid. I used to wonder who was reading those letters, you whispered. And now, he asked. I think I always knew it was you, you said. Even if you couldn't remember. Even if you'd forgotten the words you wrote. Your heart remembered the boy in the woods. And his remembered you. It started with the crows. Dozens of them, perched along the edge of the woods, unmoving, silent, like a line of watchers waiting for something. You noticed them one morning, all facing the same direction. Your cottage. Heeseung was already awake when you ran across the path. He didn't look surprised, just tired. "They're not crows," he said. "They're warnings." "From who?" Heeseung's jaw clenched. "The old ones." You frowned. "I thought you left them." "I did." "Then why are they back?" He looked out the window, expression unreadable. "Because I broke the pact. I chose love." That evening, the fog didn't rise gently like before. It crawled in, violent, fast, freezing. The sky turned the color of ash, and the trees moaned like they were being pulled apart. You were in your kitchen when you heard it, a knock. Not at the door. At the window. And when you looked, there was someone standing there. Not someone. Something. Its smile was wide and wrong. Its skin cracked like porcelain, glowing faintly underneath. You dropped your cup. And suddenly, Heeseung was in front of you, between you and the glass. The creature tilted its head. "You've grown soft, Lee Heeseung." "You don't belong here," Heeseung growled. "You don't belong here," it hissed back. You could feel the air vibrating between them. Your skin prickled. Your heart pounded. And then, as fast as it had appeared, the creature was gone. But you could still smell it, like rot and frost and something ancient. That night, Heeseung lit every candle in the house. No electricity. No lights. Just fire. "They're testing the border," he said quietly. "Trying to see if I'll run." "Will you?" He looked at you, face flickering in the glow. "I ran before. I won't run now." You swallowed. "Because of me." "Because you're the only thing I've ever chosen freely." You touched his hand. "So what do we do?" Heeseung hesitated. "There's a ritual. Old magic. I never used it because it requires something precious." "What kind of something?" He didn't answer at first. Then, "A heartbeat. Yours." You didn't sleep. Instead, you lay on the couch while Heeseung sat beside the fireplace, keeping watch. At some point in the night, you spoke. "Why do they want me?" "Because you made me human," he said softly. "And they hate what they don't understand." You looked at him. Eyes no longer glowing red. No longer cold. Just tired. Warm. Real. "Then they're too late," you whispered. "Because I already gave you my heart." The next morning, Heeseung handed you something wrapped in cloth. It was old. Delicate. A faded piece of parchment, stained, curled at the corners. Your handwriting, unmistakable. But this one, you never remembered writing it. Heeseung unwrapped it slowly and placed it in your hands. You read it once. Then twice. "If I forget you, it's not because I want to. It's because I have to. There's a sickness in my mind, something growing, something chasing me from the inside. If I lose my name, my words, my memories, find me again. Remind me who I was when I loved you." Tears filled your eyes before you even realized they'd started falling. "I wrote this." Heeseung nodded. "The last letter. You buried it near the hollow tree." "But why?" Heeseung looked away, his voice rough. "There was something hunting you, feeding off your memories. I begged you to stay. You refused." "Why?" "Because you wanted me to live." That afternoon, Heeseung began preparing the ritual. The ritual of remembrance. You helped him draw symbols in salt across the wooden floor of your cottage. It smelled like rosemary and burning sage, like old pages and something faintly metallic. Heeseung pulled out a glass vial from under his shirt. Inside was a single drop of silver-red liquid. Your blood. From the day you left. The last thing you gave him before disappearing. "You kept this all these years." "I didn't know if I'd ever see you again," Heeseung said softly. The ritual required two things, a binding object and a willing offering. Heeseung had both. As the candles flickered and the last rays of light faded, he whispered the incantation in a language older than fire. The wind howled. And then, your breath caught. Everything came back. The letters. The night in the forest. The way you watched him from the trees. The way your heart had pounded when you realized the monster people feared was the boy who had written back. You collapsed forward, and Heeseung caught you instantly, arms warm, real. "I remember," you whispered, breath trembling. "I remember you." His eyes shimmered, not red, not gold. Just human. Just Heeseung. Later, you sat side by side beneath the stars, wrapped in one thick blanket, legs tangled, hearts quiet. "I thought I lost you," Heeseung murmured. "You didn't," you said, resting your head on his shoulder. "I just forgot the way home." "And now?" You smiled. "I'm right where I'm supposed to be." But far in the woods, something moved. The old ones had felt the ritual. The connection. The return. And they were not done yet. You woke before dawn. Heeseung was already outside, standing at the tree line like he was listening for something you couldn't hear. His shoulders were tense, his breath still. "They're close," he said without turning. "Tonight they'll cross." You stepped beside him. "Then let them come." He looked at you then, really looked. Like he was memorizing the shape of your face, the color of your sleep-heavy eyes. Like he wasn't sure he'd ever get to do it again. "Heeseung." He didn't answer. Just pulled something from his pocket. A letter. Yellowed with time. Sealed. He pressed it into your palm. "I wrote this the night I gave up my immortality. I never sent it. Didn't think it mattered anymore." "What is it?" Heeseung smiled faintly. "My goodbye." You didn't open it. Not yet. Not while he stood there like a man made of ash and promise, staring into a storm he couldn't outrun. That night, the sky turned to ink. The forest burned cold. And they came. The old ones. Shadows with faces. Voices like knives. Eyes that saw through bone and memory. Heeseung stood in front of you, fists clenched, heart human, but still defiant. "You can't have her," he said. "She was never yours to keep," one of them hissed. "She's mine," he said, "because she chose me. And I chose her. Over eternity. Over power. Over you." They laughed. Low and cruel. "Then die as a man." And Heeseung smiled, soft and wild. "That's the point." The fight was brutal. Ancient spells cracking through the woods. Fire spinning from salt lines. Heeseung bled. Fell. Rose again. And then, he turned to you, eyes calm in the chaos. "Read the letter." "Heeseung." "Now." Your hands shook as you tore it open, the words written in his steady hand. "If you're reading this, then I did what I always swore I wouldn't. I left you behind. But it was never to escape. It was to protect you. You made me want to be more than a myth. More than a monster. You made me human. And being human means loving with all you have. Even when it breaks you. So if I fall tonight, know that I didn't die in fear. I died full. I died free. I died yours. And if there's any magic left in this world, maybe one day, I'll find you again. Even if I don't remember your name. Even if you don't remember mine. Somewhere, somehow, I'll know the way back. Always." Heeseung, asterisk. You dropped to your knees. And screamed. The woods answered. Not in cruelty. But in silence. Because as the last shadow fell, so did Heeseung. But the story doesn't end here. Because you ran to him. Held his face. Begged for breath. For warmth. And the wind stirred. And someone, listened. A trade. Your final memory. For his final heartbeat. You took it. And when the light returned, so did Heeseung. He gasped awake in your arms. But his eyes were full of confusion. "Who are you?" You smiled through tears. "Just someone who used to write letters to trees." Heeseung didn't remember your name. Not the sound of your laugh. Not the warmth of your hands. Not the letters you used to hide in the roots of the hollow tree. But he remembered this. The way you looked at him like he was worth something. The way your voice quieted the noise in his head. The way his heart ached when he saw you cry. He didn't remember you. But he felt you. And sometimes, that's enough. You didn't try to rush it. You made him tea in the mornings, rosehip and honey, like always. You sat by the fire and told him stories about the strange little village with its gossiping mailman and nosy baker. You walked through the woods together. And every time he paused by the hollow tree, you smiled and said nothing. Let the wind do the remembering. One day, he found a letter tucked in his coat pocket. Not written by you, but by him. Old paper. Familiar handwriting. He read it with trembling fingers. "Dear you, I don't know if I'll survive this. But I want you to know, you made me want to. Just once, I wanted forever. Not as a monster, but as a man." He looked up. You were standing in the doorway, holding 2 mugs. "I used to be in love with a vampire," you teased softly. He was grumpy. Terrible at compliments. Always complained about my singing. Heeseung laughed. It startled both of you. "I think," he said slowly, "that I might have loved you too." You bit your lip. Still might. It didn't happen all at once. But one morning, as you passed him in the garden, Heeseung brushed your pinky with his. And when you turned, startled, he just whispered, "Found you." The tree in the woods still stands. Letters still sleep in its roots. But these days, they're signed with 2 names. And sealed with a little clumsy heart drawn between them. You never got your memories back. He never got his immortality. But somehow, in a quiet village full of stubborn birds and second chances, that was more than enough.